And he came back looking amazing and got himself ready for a SummerSlam match, which at the time they were saying was supposed to be a one-off. I guess he was going to come in, work one return match, and maybe not come back again, or maybe come back just for a couple of matches here or there. And they even set the whole thing up as a street fight, so we weren't even going to get, you know, the old Shawn Michaels with the Shawn Michaels tights and the whole deal. He was going to be out there in street clothes and jeans, you know, trying to face Triple H in this unsanctioned brawl at SummerSlam. And according to the poll that I put up on Twitter, I asked you guys, I took the 4 best matches or the 4 biggest matches that these two have ever had and had you guys vote on it, and SummerSlam 2002 won by far as the favorite Shawn Michaels versus Triple H match of all time. So the very first time they faced each other on a big stage was everyone's favorite, and that's very telling, and it just goes to show you what a freak of nature Shawn Michaels is, because you watch that match back, it's as if he wrestled the day before. It's as if he never took a day off from wrestling ever. He came back like he didn't miss a beat. He looked like $1 million. He had a brutal war with Triple H. You know, there was chair shots and there was ladders and there was tables and there was blood from both guys, sledgehammers, just all sorts of brutality in this match, which is pretty scary for a guy coming back after 4 years not being in the ring and not used to taking this type of punishment. This motherfucker's diving off the top rope onto the floor through tables onto Triple H. I love that shot of him climbing to the top rope, and he kind of just shrugs his shoulders and he points to his head like, yep, I'm out of my fucking mind, and then dives off right on top of Triple H. Great stuff. When it comes down to all of the matches that they've had that I'm going to talk about here in a minute, this one as well, I think, was my favorite, and Shawn Michaels was victorious upon his return. Triple H did the job for him. Shawn caught him with kind of like a roll-up move at the end and got the pin, and that's when they decided to do the angle where Shawn Michaels got nailed in the back by Triple H's sledgehammer. Triple H, of course, attacked Shawn after the match and put Shawn back on the shelf, because I think at the time they weren't expecting Shawn to come back. So they did the whole angle where he was injured. He had to be carried away on a stretcher. He was even in a wheelchair on TV for a little while until the injury just miraculously went away. I forgot where he was. I know he was at WWE New York, or he was at the big restaurant in Times Square. It was either a Monday Night Raw or Sunday Night Heat or some shit like that. And he rolls his ass out there in the wheelchair only just to stand up like nothing's wrong, and he's back. So Shawn would then return to enter the Elimination Chamber, the first ever Elimination Chamber at Survivor Series 2002 in Madison Square Garden. The Elimination Chamber was the concept that Eric Bischoff introduced when he was commissioner, and he put Shawn Michaels in the match. He was in there with a bunch of guys, Booker T, Rob Van Dam, Triple H, I can't remember who else, Jericho, Kane maybe, and wound up winning the World Heavyweight title. Shawn Michaels, in his second match back, becomes world champion. And I always remember that match because Shawn had that little stable boy haircut and he had those shit brown tights on and he looked terrible. Triple H got seriously injured in that match. I can't remember who did it. It was either Shawn or Rob Van Dam. Somebody hurt Triple H pretty good. And that was a pretty brutal match. I've never really been a fan of the Elimination Chamber match itself. I just think it's fucking ridiculous and it's way over the top and a lot crazier than anything I really need to see. But I like this first one because of Shawn. You know, Shawn coming back and winning the title in the Garden. Shawn has not had a lot of luck in Madison Square Garden. 6 years prior to that, at Survivor Series in 1996, the entire arena turned their back on him and were cheering for Sid. So that was kind of a nice full circle moment for Shawn, losing the title in the Garden and coming back to win another one several years later. And I would never get used to seeing Shawn Michaels with that World Heavyweight title. You realize that's the only title, the only world title he held since he came back. He had that quick run, maybe 1 month, with the World Heavyweight title, and he was never world champion again. And I've mentioned that several times about Shawn Michaels, how, you know, you always heard the stories back in the day, how he was very political, never wanted to drop any belts. And you always heard these horror stories about how Shawn doesn't want to do jobs, and he always wants to be on top, and he always wants the spotlight. He came back in 2002, and I think WWE gave him the spotlight. He wasn't demanding it. I think WWE wanted to put the belt on him, and he won it at the Elimination Chamber, and he would wind up dropping it the next month back to Triple H at Armageddon, and that was the last time Shawn Michaels would be world champion. And he just didn't look right with that big gold belt. You know, that's another thing. I said how it was eerie to see Shawn Michaels wearing the NWO shirt on WWE, because we could have easily seen him doing that on Nitro. And if he would have gone to WCW, he might have won that world title over there, and he would have had that big belt around his waist. And I always thought, because Shawn's not a big guy, and I always thought the Winged Eagle belt looked much better on him. Just watching him come down to the ring during that time, he had a match with Rob Van Dam, I think on Monday Night Raw in late 2002 there, before his match with Triple H at Armageddon, and just seeing him come down to the ring with that belt just didn't look right. It still doesn't look right. I still can't really get used to it when I see it. You know, whenever I think of Shawn as being a world champion, I think of him with the Winged Eagle belt, not the WCW belt. But it was a very short run for him. He had the 3 stages of hell with Triple H at Armageddon. That match was on the list of their greatest of all time. I liked this match. It definitely wasn't my favorite, but it was a really good match. And Triple H wound up winning the title back, tipping Shawn over on the ladder, over the top rope, through several tables, allowing Triple H to climb up to the top and retrieve the World Heavyweight title and win that back. And then after that, Shawn would start to become a little bit more full-time. That's when he entered the Royal Rumble in 2003 and started his feud with Chris Jericho, and he would face him at WrestleMania. Kevin Nash would come back shortly after WrestleMania, and he would be feuding with Triple H. So Shawn Michaels and Triple H did not have a whole lot of interaction in 2003. The only match I can remember between the two of them was December 29th, 2003. It was in San Antonio, Shawn's hometown, on Monday Night Raw. World Heavyweight title on the line, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels. And that match, I think, was better than their Armageddon match. I probably should have put that on my Twitter poll the other day, because this one was so good and was such a fun, wild ride. I remember I was here in San Diego. At the time, I was living in North Carolina, but my family was living here, so I would fly out here every year for Christmas to visit them for a week, and I would always go home very late. Sometimes I would even come back to North Carolina in the beginning of the year, and I remember being in my parents' living room in 2003 visiting when this match aired, and I remember watching the whole thing fucking marking out. Even my dad was nearby. He goes, "Is that Shawn Michaels?" You know, because he's somewhat familiar with wrestling, and my parents always knew that I was a huge wrestling fan, and they would always let me watch wrestling in their house, which was so cool. But I remember being home for Christmas that year and watching that great match with Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Shawn, you know, we thought had won the title. He super kicked Triple H, landed on top of him. There was all sorts of shit going on during the match. Eric Bischoff was out there. Ric Flair was out there. Earl, I think, was the referee and got knocked out. So they had no ref for the match. So Eric Bischoff wound up getting in and started reffing the match. And at the end, when Shawn hit Triple H with a super kick and fell on him, Shawn Michaels' shoulders were also on the mat. And you could tell that. Eric Bischoff counted the 3 anyway. Shawn's music started playing. The crowd is going nuts. Eric Bischoff says, "Your winner," and still World Heavyweight Champion Triple H, and the crowd just immediately goes silent. And he shows a replay on the Tron, shows Shawn Michaels' shoulders were also down. It was one of those the tie goes to the runner type of situations, and he awarded Triple H the World Heavyweight title and said he's still the champ. That pisses Shawn Michaels off, and he decks Eric Bischoff, and that was right after Survivor Series 2, when Shawn had to fight for Austin's job in WWE, and he lost. So Austin, he returned at the end of this thing, because right after Shawn Michaels nailed Bischoff, he gets on the mic and says, "Shawn Michaels, you're fired." And Shawn Michaels stayed fired for about 45 seconds. Austin makes his way to the ring. He announces that he's back and he's the new sheriff in town. And he immediately rehires Shawn Michaels and grants him a rematch. And I believe that would wind up being the match they would have at the Royal Rumble a few weeks later. And that was a last man standing match. This match was fun too. I went back and watched all of these matches in preparation to do this video, and I really liked this last man standing match. I think the only weakness in the last man standing match is that it really didn't have a winner, but the match itself was a lot of fun, and it was nice to see the Triple H and Shawn Michaels rivalry, you know, being picked back up in 2004, just adding to their insane story. But it was a bloody match, very, very bloody brawl, and I think both guys were counted out in the ring, if I remember right. I think that was the finish. Shawn, I think, hit Triple H with another super kick at the end. Neither man could answer the 10 count. They were both carried out on a stretcher. Shawn actually jumped off the stretcher and insisted on walking, but the story that was told in this is that both guys just refused to lose. You know, they're going to do whatever it takes to not lose to the other. Jerry Lawler was saying a few times that, you know, he doesn't think either guy is really concerned about winning. They're just more concerned about not losing. And that was kind of the theme during that match. But that was a really good match at the Royal Rumble. One of the best Royal Rumble title matches ever. We've had some awesome title matches throughout the years. You know, the year before, you know, Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle tore the house down as well. So this was a fun time, and there were some awesome matches taking place in 2003 and 2004 between these guys. And that, of course, would lead to the big triple threat match at WrestleMania 20 between Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chris Benoit. And I remember, you know, it's a shame that we can never really look back on this with any fondness, because I thought this was such a big night in the company's history. This is something that on paper you would never think you would see. Chris Benoit, a guy that's made his career primarily outside of the WWE. He's well-traveled internationally, and he had a lot of success in WCW. And then a WCW guy comes over to WWE and main events their biggest show in history, the 20th anniversary of WrestleMania, and he's in there in a triple threat match against the two most powerful wrestlers in the locker room. One of them's married to Stephanie, the other one's Shawn fucking Michaels. You know, when you look at those three, who in the world thinks that Chris Benoit is going to be able to win this match? But he did. It was one of my favorite WrestleMania matches ever, and it still pisses me off that Benoit did what he did, and we can never really celebrate this the way it should have been. It's pretty incredible that happens. And Eddie Guerrero, too. You know, Eddie Guerrero defeated Kurt Angle earlier on in the night, and him and Chris shared a hug to close out WrestleMania 20. I thought it was just a great moment, and I thought it was really awesome for Shawn Michaels and Triple H to put over Benoit like that. And they would do it again. Didn't they do it like the next month at Backlash? And that's when Shawn Michaels tapped out to the sharpshooter from Benoit. So, you know, it's a small chapter in the rivalry of Triple H and Shawn Michaels, but it's definitely worth mentioning what these guys did when they worked with Chris Benoit. And that would pretty much lead us to the blow-off. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. 2004 was basically the end of the rivalry. We're going to talk about a few other things that they did, but 2004, I think the Hell in the Cell match at Bad Blood, that was the definitive end, I believe, to the rivalry between Shawn Michaels and Triple H. That match went nearly an hour. I think it was 47 minutes long. I watched that just the other day as well. Watched it from start to finish. And it was a hell of a ride. I enjoyed the Hell in the Cell match. Again, much like the Last Man Standing match, it was a very good match, but I'm not sure if it was my overall favorite. I'm with all of you who say that SummerSlam 2002 was the best, but watching those two guys brutalize each other was a lot of fun. It was just a hell of a story between the two. The constant one-upmanship, the constant jockeying for position in the company, which man is better, and Triple H, you know, he really thrived when Shawn Michaels left. You know, for him to make it to that level and win a lot more world titles than Shawn Michaels ever did, you certainly would not have seen that coming in 1996. And here we fast forward through all these years. They've had all of these great, amazing matches with each other and a really, really storied rivalry. And then they end things in Hell in the Cell, a match that Shawn Michaels kind of invented. He was in the first one ever. And then Triple H went on to have a few great ones. I mean, he faced, I think he beat Chris Jericho a couple years before that. Then he went on to defeat Kevin Nash in a Hell in the Cell, and now he's facing Shawn Michaels. It's like 3 years in a row, Hell in the Cell matches for Triple H, and he winds up defeating Shawn Michaels in just an epic match. Epic fucking match. Both guys were just laying there in a pool of their own blood, and Triple H wins by the skin of his teeth, and it's worth a watch. If it's a match you haven't taken a look back at in a while, fire up the network and take a look, because it was a classic, man. A classic fucking match that went a long time. It's hard to wrestle for 45 minutes in a match that brutal, and those guys did.